welcome back to another bonus episode of Sex Ed. This one is a throwback to all of our sex educators that we had on throughout the season, and it's just some clips that were either really powerful or breaking stigmas, the taboos, all that kind of thing. So I hope that you enjoy what we did this season in a snapshot. Bye.
I am married. I am a mother of two tiny humans. I think it's, being caught in the monotony of marriage and parenthood is something that Matt and I certainly share together in responsibility and all those things. How would you guide a potential client, student, or one of our listeners to go on what sounds like a really complicated journey of figuring out who you are to be able to trust yourself?
It is a journey.
Just want to thank you for your vulnerability, first of all.
Yeah. Thanks. It's really physically uncomfortable.
Yeah. I can feel that, but you're doing it anyway. Yeah. That's vulnerability. Like, that's a step right there. That is a perfect example of doing it, of getting closer to your essence. I'm going to let Leah take it away.
I think it is a complex journey, and it's one that I think we're all meant to step into in this lifetime. Coming into a body and being human and discovering, who am I? Why am I here? What's the point of all of this? How do I know I'm lovable? How do I know that I'm worthy? How do I experience things that my soul deeply, deeply desires, but it's so scary to admit it, because what if I don't get it? So like we have all these like parts inside of ourselves that so wants to have a beautiful life, and we question whether or not we're worthy of it. And then we try to go forth in the world and try to introduce the world to us in the hopes that they like what they see, that they're attracted to what they see, and that we get sort of that affirmation back from the universe. And so it's just like, that's the journey I think we're all meant to go on. And so one of the things that I really love about what the Tao and Tantra provides is it gives us a chance to cultivate the things that we most want. So if I don't know myself, I don't know if I can trust myself, I might have a lot of proof that says, see, you can't trust yourself. You made a really bad choice when you dated so-and-so. You really screwed up. How are you going to attract somebody different than that? Because the last three people you attracted had the same problems as so-and-so. And so you start to kind of take a look at your track record and you go, I have proof that I can't trust myself, that I'll screw up again. And so you have to just sort of hold yourself gently. And I think you also have to come to a point of going, and I want that to be different. I do desire to show up like in my essence, like Willow says, because that's really what you are. All the stories are just stories that say you're not. The truth is you are love. And it's not about what you do that makes you love or worthy of love. It's just being a being that has breath. That's just number one. And so like finding a way to come into your core and trusting that that is true. And then you learn how to have high regard for yourself. Because if you want other people to have high regard for you and to respect you and to see you, that starts with you being able to respect and receive and see yourself. And so we have to kind of have someone oftentimes that can usher us through these obstacles when we're filled with self-doubt or our self-esteem is in the dumps. And that was my journey. I grew up with sexual abuse. I thought I was a hideous person. I looked in the mirror and I truly thought I was a dog. I was like, I am ugly, hideous, and unlovable. I look at myself now and I go, there's such incongruency with that thought form. How in the world did I ever truly believe that? But I did. And it just got to a point where it was so painful. It got so fucking painful that I had to do something about it. And that's usually where I think other people start to begin. They realize I'm so sick of this pain that I'm in that I'm willing to do anything to get out of it, even if that means learning how to love myself. And so what got me out of that hell was I realized I couldn't think myself into loving myself. I had to actually do something physical, emotional, spiritual. And that meant I had to touch myself and say nice things to myself and get to know my body. And every time something hateful would arise, I had to turn down the volume on that hateful voice, that critical voice. And I had to invent a new voice, a loving voice, the fairy godmother, whatever it took, that was going to shower and change those thoughts in my mind so I could see myself differently. And it was a huge transformation.
Like if you look at some of the medieval things, like, pumps have been around since like the late 1800s. And so as you can imagine, like things have changed since that time. I don't think a pump is a bad word. I don't think that men should be nervous or scared about pumps. I think it's something that in my practice, we make it part of a routine of things that they're doing. If they're, like I said, if they're coming in for ED or if they're trying to be proactive about their sexual health, we do introduce pumps. The good thing about pumps is that there's hardly any side effects if you do it correctly. So if you're on medications, if you're whatever else is going on in your life, I mean, you can use a pump, unless there are some contraindications, like for instance, like sickle cell or guys that are having like intermittent priapism, those are erections lasting too long. We don't recommend it to those patients, but if you're doing it correctly, then, it's not going to do any harm. Obviously we're all guys out there. They think more is better. And so some guys are pumping their penis and keeping it inflated for like 20 minutes and stretching it. And we know that's not the correct way to do it. The good thing about the hydro pump or the exerciser is that you can use it in the shower. And so it's something that we all do, right? It's not taking a lot of time. That's why guys like it, because they're just in the shower. What else you do in the shower? You can sing in the shower, you can soap off, and then you can use kind of a pump. So they kind of make it as part of their routine. So that's why I like it in particular.
Yeah. You answered my next question, which was going to be how little or, how much of a side effect is there from it. And it's one of those things like to the research that I've done there, if you're using it correctly, similar to like a inversion table, if you're using it correctly for the recommended amount of time, for the recommended situations, there's, not a ton that, adversely affects you. And I think that that's good. Would you consider it homeopathic kind of? Because it's not.
I would consider it as kind of more treatment, like rehab for some guys, treatment for other guys, preventative for other guys. That's how I would kind of. It depends on why we're using it. We have different protocols for different for guys that have different issues. Like we have protocols for guys that have Peyronie's. We have protocols for guys that have issues after prostate cancer. We have a different protocol if you have ED. We have a different protocol if some guys are just interested in kind of just getting ahead of things and just focused on their erectile health. So there's different protocols for each. The biggest thing is not using it too long, because that's when guys get into trouble. And when they overextend, it's a little harder to do that with the exerciser just because it's of the hydro pump. And we see that mostly with the pneumatic pump, but you can also overdo it with the hydro pump. You just have to make sure that you're doing it correctly, and you're not doing it for too long. I mean, when you look at oxygenation of the tissue in the penis, if you're pumping up too long, and when they check a blood gas, that means they check how much oxygen's in the tissue. The longer it's up, the less oxygen you have, the less healthy your penis is. So we don't want to extend it for more than like 20 or so minutes.
Yeah. And that's good following of directions and usage. Like all things, using it as it is intended is probably going to be the best. What is your approach to teaching about sex and sexuality? Like using that as an example of, how I was able to learn, try listening to this from a podcast, or try opening the conversation. What's your approach to teaching about that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'd say, one of the exactly what you did is really good. Opening the conversation, like, hey, I heard this little ditty about, anal sex. You want to hear about it, and you might have a partner who's like, hell no, don't come near me, and so And so it's just, but if they're willing to listen, that's a step in the right direction. And there's no destination. I think that's one of the main things that we teach that's
100%.
like pinnacle. There's no destination. We're not trying to get anywhere. We're not trying to achieve anything here. We're just being present. And through that presence, intimacy is made up of 3 pillars. We've got trust, vulnerability, and presence. That's what true intimacy is. And without that trust of yourself, that connection and relationship to your own essence, your own inner beloved, trusting that you can come home to that, you can't really trust the other person. So therefore, then you couldn't be vulnerable with the other person. So when you trust yourself at that deep, deep level, then you can be vulnerable with the other person. Then you've got this trust vulnerability loop going on between you and another. And presence just comes in very, very naturally. And that presence breeds curiosity. And then through that curiosity, it's just a game. Like we're just in the sandbox with each other. This is how we play as adults. So it's like, what happens when I stick my finger up your ass? You know, what happens when I hold your heart chakra and look into your left eye, the eye of the soul? You know, what happens when you know, I fuck you from behind for 25 minutes? Do you know, just figuring it out, playing with it. And when we're, you know, there's all different genders going on in the world today. And so we're playing with that as well sexually. Like what works for me as a vulva owner today may not work for me as this particular vulva owner tomorrow. So it's like, we really want to bring that presence and that curiosity into every single situation. And then everything becomes a tantric experience. A tantra is a Sanskrit word, and it means a tool for expansion. So it's basically a platform to expand who we know ourselves to be, to expand our confidence, and to be able to experience more than we thought was possible.
I got more questions and I want to get to them. This is something that I can't experience. But why do you think that it's important for vulva owners to really take a look at themselves and, you know, appreciate every part? And, you know, how should they do this? Like I've heard, you know, look at yourself in the mirror, like those kind of things. Like what do you suggest, and why do you think that is so important?
Yeah. That's what I come across, and it used to be my experience that, like, I remember that as I lay in back, like I never looked at myself. And I think for penis owners, like you, every time you go like pee, you see yourself, right? And you're out there. Like for us, for women, like for vulva owners, like we need to like really grab a mirror and sit back. And so there is something that is unknown. Like I don't know what is there. And then when we watch porn, it has certain shape, which is like looks like a peach. And women have like so many different shapes and so different forms. And so a lot of times when I look at myself and it looks different from what media shows, right? It's like, oh, I look ugly. So I used to think that my vulva looks horrible. And so when my partner goes down on me, I was praying that the lights are off, or if we had this, like, you know, like a light on, and I'm like, oh my God, he sees that horrible scene. And so, and like what it does that I can't relax and enjoy, right? Because instead of like this, it goes to the whole body, that there is correlation, there is research done that the more I accept and love my body, my whole body, including genitals, the deeper I can enjoy sex. And so like thinking that my vulva is looking not beautiful, it takes me away from enjoyment, right? So what helps, and the journey I did, that I started looking through the, you know, like this glance of like, oh, like she looks like a different flower. She's not like those I saw on screen, right? Like, but she's like a flower. And then like really accepting her and falling in love with her. And then I started like talking to her, giving her a name, and you know, just like creating, because for a while it was neglecting, right? Don't show it, don't look there, don't name it. So to kind of redo it, to exaggerate it a little bit, and just like treating her like she's her own person and falling in love with her. And I had apologies. I apologized for all penetration happened when she didn't want it. I had tears as I did that, and it was very healing, powerful process. Then I promised her that only when she feels on fire, that anything goes inside. And so the more I developed this relationship with my vulva, the more I enjoyed, the more I could feel, you know, like the more I enjoy, the more sexuality is unfolding.
You know, I have to say that for decades, my mind wasn't wired for fantasizing. Like, I didn't have, like, someone say, hey, what's your fantasy? I'd be like, I don't fucking know. You know, like, try something. I'll tell you if I like it. Like, I don't know how to access fantasies. My brain doesn't think like that. I don't get turned on by pictures and ideas of things being done to me. I had no access to that. And the reason why I bring that up is because it kind of comes back to the boss phase. Like, there came a point where I had to pursue my own, as Willa would call it, sexual sovereignty. I needed to pursue and understand what does turn me on. What gets me wet? What lights me up? What makes me want to have sex? What causes me to want to press on the accelerator? What causes me to want to press on the brakes? If you're not asking yourself those questions, then you end up being a victim to fate in your life. And so we have to also, as women in particular, because we've normalized male sexual energy, we've normalized male sexual fantasies and pursuits. I mean, even as little boys and they get their little erections, we've really normalized that for boys to a large degree, but we haven't for girls. Kind of goes back to purity culture. We're supposed to not want to have it so that we remain this pristine thing. And so that has caused women to not know what it is that they turns them on, or doesn't give them a clear access to their desire or to their turn on. It's like we're expected to be ignorant instead of being encouraged to find out, to go on a journey. When you can become responsible for your own pleasure and your own orgasms, sex becomes a blast. It is no longer a chore, and it's no longer someone else's job. We start to take failure and success out of the equation again. So I really want to encourage all the boss babes out there that you really want to go on a journey of becoming a sexually sovereign woman, to discover for yourself what lights you up, and then hand that map to every lover you encounter. And let's also support them in being successful, because when they have your map, man, saying yes to sex is just so damn easy. It's really not this chore anymore.
I really agree. Yeah, I think that so much of our shutting down and sexual shame and not advocating for ourselves it can show up in other realms. And then it's interesting with women too, though, there can be that double story where we lead this double life where we are quite proactive and ambitious in the outer world. And then we get to the bedroom and we're just like, no one's ever asked us what we want. We don't know what we want. We don't know what we can ask for. Yeah. So it can be, but overall, I really think the overarching idea is that when we are sexually empowered and having good orgasms and feeling good, like we feel good in other realms of our lives, like the good endorphins are running through our bodies. And
I just had a conversation with my wife. That might have been last night. I was doing research on you. So I was bouncing ideas and questions off of her to, just to get a feel for it. And, I asked her, like, the first time you bought a vibrator, was that when we got together, or did you have one before? And she was like, well, yeah, no. And then it dawned on me. It's like, why is it that people are so threatened by, a battery or something like that? Like it's so wild to me. And then, we started talking about it, and like, she was like, the most she ever had before that was like a Kama Sutra book. And in my head, I was like, okay. And I was like, did you try any of it? And she was like, I don't think so. So it's like, partners, you got to be out there, especially like the male partners that might be listening, or the people that are, that are afraid of asking and understanding and hear, like the age old, don't ask because you don't want to hear the answer. This is not applicable here. You want the answer because it's about pleasure. It's about making sure that they feel heard, seen, and you unlock that pleasure. So I don't know. Like I said, it's so wild to me.
Yeah. If I could, things that I really care about is like using more lube, going slower when you approach the clit. Just those are two really important things. And like anything that you bring in is an enhancement. It's not taking away from what your partner can already offer. It's an enhancement, Absolutely. Like you go to get your taco, you want to put all the toppings on it, right? It doesn't mean you didn't like the taco.
Yeah. I mean, so like it seemed like they were stressed out and they just weren't feeling themselves and had a low sex drive because of it, and they were trying to figure out how to get back to feeling like they wanted to, but also, feeling like they could be sexy in the same tone.
I think I have women come to me all the time I'm like, what's your libido? Scale of 1 to 10. They're like 0.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, it's not impossible. It's impossible to have 0, like if you have breath, you have libido. If you have breath, you have sexual essence. It's just part of being alive. And so what I find is often, if you're at a 0 or a 1 or very low on that scale, you just have a lot of like pressure on you, a lot of I like to call it heavy wet blankets. It's like you're piled up with like 10 heavy wet blankets, and we just need to take one blanket off. Let's just take one off. Let's start there, and then we take another one off, and then we take another. We're 5 blankets off now, and we're like, oh, something's starting to sizzle. I can feel a little bit of like, I want to move my body. I want to breathe more deeply. Then we get 4 more blankets off. It's like, oh my gosh, now I can feel my mojo coming back. And then when we finally get that final heavy wet blanket off, whatever it is, could be a low adrenal reserve. It could be, a financial stress or a family stress. Could be anything. To get that final blanket off, and they're like, oh, all this energy returns to the woman. Women give away their energy so quickly and so readily and so unconsciously and also consciously. And it for a woman to reclaim her energy that's what empowerment is. And that is where drive and desire and libido return to life. And it is very much physiologically, very much tied into your adrenal glands. So, we hear this all the time. Oh, I have adrenal burnout, and we're just running on cortisol, leaking cortisol every time we're 5 minutes late to an interview, right? Caitlin, did you have a little bit of that today?
As soon as you said that, I was like, I don't know what TikTok overheard me having a conversation about. I'm just fully convinced that I'm head to toe cortisol right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get it out of there.
You know how? Orgasm. So even if it's just to have
Doctor's orders.
Yes. Orgasm a day keeps the cortisol away. So even if you're just rubbing one out with your vibrator, I don't care. However you got to do it, however you got to have it, that is going to flood your bloodstream with oxytocin. That's the love hormone, the connective hormone, the like open, receptive vessel hormone. And it's going to push all that cortisol out.